So continuing on talking about the Raiders a little bit before I move on to some other sports news. I've been seeing, some reports on like Threads, on Blue Sky, on Instagram that, Mike Vrabel is considered a strong head coach candidate for the Raiders. And if that were to happen, that would mean that Antonio Pierce would be out as a Raiders head coach. That would bring in Mike Vrabel. And some of this is centered around because Tom Brady is now, minority owner of the Las Vegas Raiders. And it's reported that he will have a heavy influence on what the Raiders do in the offseason, their success, and how they run the team, which let me go on the record and say that sounds great to me. Not only does Tom Brady own us on the field, but now he legitimately owns us legally as well. And he's got to also tell us how to run our franchise. And now I say that in tongue in cheek, but in truth, that's probably the best that we can hope for is, an arguably the greatest player of all time in Tom Brady, the winningest player of all time, being someone that is going to take it upon himself to bring a franchise like the Raiders into the spotlight and into a realm of success that, quite frankly, we aren't used to. And I'm curious to see what that is. So as a Raiders fan, as somebody that's seeing all this, at this point, we're all upset that sometimes either when Al Davis was around, we didn't like his business decisions. Mark Davis, now we're all kind of, up in arms about certain decisions that Mark Davis makes. And now we have Tom Brady, who's kind of going to be leading the football operations side of the ownership, it sounds like. So that way Mark Davis could not maybe get a step aside and let a fresh voice kind of make football decisions from a football player. That actually sounds very interesting. Very curious to see how this all plays out now in the offseason. What concerns me is I'm not saying that Mike Vrabel isn't a good coach. In fact, I really liked Mike Vrabel last week's episode when I had Michael Davis of Boom Broadcasting. I did say that I thought Mike Vrabel would probably be the best head coach to lead the Dallas Cowboys because comments that Micah Parsons made about Mike McCarthy, I thought were alarming. I don't think he makes those comments if a coach like Mike Vrabel, who demands respect from not only his players, but his coaching staff, and he's just a leader among men, and it's very apparent. In his time in Tennessee, very successful as a head coach, just kind of wasn't given an opportunity to continue to turn the ship around and was let go, even though he had a winning record and Tennessee was pretty successful under Vrabel's tenure. So now, as Vrabel is over in Cleveland, which Cleveland is going through their situation right now, they will probably let go of Kevin Stefanski, which I don't think they should, which means Mike Vrabel is going to be on the hunt for a head coaching position. And there are going to be several teams looking for a head coach. Cowboys are on that list. I don't think the Raiders are going to be in the market for a head coach. We just hired AP. This is his first full season as a head coach. He has coached in 10 weeks technically because there's a bye week. And to just assume that after 11 weeks of AP is enough for us to assume that he's not the guy for the job is not a great sign for Raiders, the organization itself. In order for our, culture to set in order to get, your system in place, your whatever you're trying to teach your players, your coaching staff in your current regime, you're going to need more time than just 10 or 11 weeks. And I don't think it's fair for AP to be taken out to the pasture, so to speak, just because we're not, 10-0, or we're not 7-3, or a playoff contending team. Like that's not necessarily fair. We had an OC who we all can agree with wasn't a great hire, which it also wasn't AP's first choice. That was Cliff Kingsbury, who's in Washington doing really well right now. So AP's guy that he originally wanted, who is having a successful year at on a different team, could have been with us. That's not AP's fault. AP was told, he couldn't because of how much money that the OC position was asking for, or Kingsbury was asking for. And so the cheapest option, and unfortunately you get what you paid for, was Luke Getsy. And I think AP should be commended a little bit, though, to recognize that after 9 weeks and, several opportunities to turn it around, regardless of injury, it still didn't look right. And he made the decision that, okay, it's time to change the offense. And he's trusting in a younger OC whose father has had a footprint in the NFL for several years as being a former Raiders head coach, being a former Chargers head coach, offensive minded for sure. So we'll see how this all goes. But this is AP's first year to kind of figure out what AP's voice is. Like I was talking about this last week. For us to give up on people and not allow them to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and get better, it is really hard to expect any sort of success if you don't allow that individual, that team, that organization, whatever, that failure and not learn from that failure. And it doesn't sound like that AP has lost the locker room. Does it sound like that everyone hates losing? Yes. Who likes losing? Nobody does. AP has made it very clear he hates losing. Max Crosby hates losing. But I don't hear any noise about the Raider players turning on AP. If anything, AP knows what they're going through. He is probably the best guy that's going to empathize and understand with what they're going through about going through a tough win-loss and persevering and working hard and not giving up when you need to continue to work hard. And to just let that go after 10 weeks, I think is just premature. And don't get me wrong, Mike Vrabel is a good coach. I think if this was like Josh McDaniels.
Drew Code Sports Talk is supported by SeatGeek. SeatGeek is your go-to app for tickets, making it super easy to find the best deals. They even rate each ticket deal on a scale of 1 to 10, so you know you're getting your money's worth. And as a special thank you to our listeners, we've got a promo code just for you. Use Drew Code at checkout to get $20 off your first order. That's $20 off your first purchase, whether it's for the game that you've been dying to see or that concert that everybody is talking about. Head over to SeatGeek now, find your perfect seat, and use Drew Code for $20 off your first order. SeatGeek. Get your tickets to the action today.
I think if this was Josh McDaniels and this was, let's say, his third year, and the Raiders are now 2 and whatever their record is now in Josh McDaniels' third season, and clearly again the offense isn't moving, the defense is terrible, then it would make sense. Yeah, okay, Josh McDaniels needs to go. Let's bring in Mike Vrabel to turn this around and get a completely different culture within the locker room. But I mean, who's to say that there's not a culture being built in the locker room right now with AP just because the win-loss record doesn't reflect what we want it to? The Raiders don't have the players that they want. The one player that arguably was the marquee guy outside of Max Crosby, Devontae Adams, wanted out of town to go to New York, who is a dumpster fire compared to the Raiders. And we're going to get to that later on in the show. But again, I like Mike Vrabel as a coach. I think he would be a great head coach, whatever his next stop is going to be. And it's going to be with a team that is looking for a head coach that's going to get him over the top, and it's going to be this offseason for sure. He's going to be a head coach again somewhere. I just don't agree with letting go of AP after this short amount of time. Now, is he on the hot seat? Unfortunately, yeah. Like if you're losing 6 games in a row, everyone's seat's got to get a little hot. But again, changes are being made. Starting quarterbacks are being changed. I wouldn't be surprised if he named Desmond Ridder the starting quarterback tomorrow, just to get things moving, like to change things up a bit. He's already said, what do we have to lose if we change something? It's not like we're in the playoff hunt right now. The real hunt that we're in right now is draft picks. And I know that they are not fighting for a high draft pick, but unfortunately, the more that we lose, the better position we get. So we can win and be respectable and then get, in a top 15 pick and probably miss out on a first round draft pick, of a quarterback that we want, or, we just roll with what we have and then we rebuild in the offseason through the draft, which is what we've talked about. And we also get the quarterback that we want. Which by all accounts, it sounds like it's probably going to be Shedeur Sanders if we are in the right position. So I'm going to move off of the AP situation. I do want to bring this up a little bit just to continue the conversation. This is according to ESPN.com. FPI has the Raiders with a 90% chance of getting a top 10 draft pick so far at this point. So we're in week 12, so there's 5 more weeks left of the season, or 6 more weeks left of the season. We have a 90% chance of getting a top 10 pick. We have a 56% chance of getting a top 5 pick. So we're currently holding the 5th pick right now if the season were to end and we kept the draft order as is. And we have a 14% chance of getting the number 1 overall draft pick. We have I think the 14% is really generous. I would say it's probably higher than that because we have some stiff teams that we got to play. We still have a game to play against the Broncos this Sunday. We got to play the Chargers at week 18. We still have to play the Chiefs. I believe that's on Christmas Day. We have a tough schedule coming up. So this percentage of getting the number 1 overall pick is probably going to increase for sure. So I'd be surprised if the Raiders won 4 games the whole season the way that we've been playing. So it is what it is.